Hello and welcome to UK Versus. Today we're talking Star Trek Star Realms. Star Realms is a very popular battle deck builder that has many expansions and has been going on for a lot of years. And this is a Star Trek core set using the same battle system. This is a very cool product. I've managed to pick one up. I know a few people are very hyped to get their hands on this, and I'm very excited to actually get some games in with this. I believe there's a mobile app for the base game, but I want to get into the Star Trek side because this looks very, very cool. How do we play Star Trek Star Realms? So, each player begins the game with a personal deck containing 8 scout cards and 2 raider cards and a starting authority of 50. Tracking your authority is very important because this is our health total. If you run out of authority, you lose your out. Good day, sir. So, whether it's writing it down, using an app, there are some tokens that come in the box that you can use to track your authority. And as we'll get into, if you would gain authority, you can go above your maximum authority, which is very, very cool. So, tracking your authority is very powerful. Outside of our personal deck, which will contain 8 scout cards and 2 raider cards that are unaligned, they have no faction to them, we'll also get a trade deck. A trade deck will contain 80 cards, 20 from each faction, and in Star Trek Star Realms we've got Starfleet, the Romulans, the Klingons, and the Dominion, as well as a Ferengi trade ship, but I'll come to that when I come to the trade line. You'll find the faction icon on cards in the top left-hand corner, and in the top right-hand corner you will also see a cost. There is no cost to play cards. There's a cost to buy cards, but we'll come to that a little bit later on. And when you're setting up, you have to leave space for a scrap pile, the trade deck, the trade line, your deck, and your discard pile. The trade row is 5 cards plus the Ferengi Dakara ship, and there must always be 5 cards in the trade line, but we'll get to that a little bit later. But this is how you will be building your deck. You have your 10 non-aligned cards, and you will build your deck purchasing cards from the trade row, which will then be replaced from the top of the trade deck. So all cards have icons, and I'll go into this a little bit more when we go to the card breakdown. If you see the green sort of winged symbol, that is a symbol of authority. You start with 50 authority. If you see this on a card, it is how much authority you will gain, whether through a primary ability, a ally ability, or through a scrap ability. This is how you gain authority and a way of sort of healing and keeping yourself alive. The red hexagon is your combat icon. This is how we deal damage. If you see it in the text box of a card, this is how much combat you gain, and how much combat you have allows you to then go into combat against your opponents, their locations, and their outposts. The yellow, almost coin-like symbol is your trade icon. You'll see it in the upper right-hand side of cards, indicating how much they cost to purchase. And you'll also see it in abilities to say how much trade you will gain. Then you'll also see the trash can icon. This is your scrap. This indicates an ability where you will take a card from play, move it to the scrap pile, and then get your ability through that. Very importantly, your scrap pile is not your discard pile. So when you run out of cards in this game in your deck, you shuffle up your discard and you put it face down and you continue on with the game. But cards that are in the scrap pile do not get reshuffled. They are gone. It is essentially a remove from game pile. Then we move on to bases. Bases come in grey and red. They will both have numbers within them, and that is that location's health total. You must deal that much damage to a location in that turn to destroy it. If a turn ends and the base has any amount of defense left, it will regenerate that defense for the next turn and the base survives. There are 2 types of bases. You have a regular base, which can be attacked freely along with yourself, and you have outposts. Outposts have the red symbol, and they must be attacked first. You cannot attack another location or a player while they have an outpost in place. So in a 1v1, if I have an outpost down, you cannot attack me till that outpost is gone. It is a great defensive line and a great way of securing your resources. Starting the game. Once we've got the setup, once we've got our deck shuffled, once we have our trade row and our pile set up, each player will shuffle their personal decks, place it face down, leaving room for a discard pile. Then we will randomly determine who is going to go first, and that person only draws 3 cards. The person going second will draw up to 5 cards. There is no cost. You can play as many cards as you want. So this is a great way for balancing because you can attack first, and drawing 5 cards going first when your opponent has had no chance to build or secure any kind of defenses is a very powerful move, allowing the player going first to have some kind of drawback, only drawing 3 cards, allowing them to make some early trades, get some early combat in, but not too much, because at the end of their turn, they're going to have 5 cards back in hand waiting for their second turn. If you look at multiplayer rules, it gets a bit more complicated, but in this instance, the first player gets 3 cards, second player gets 5 cards, and moving on from that, we will always have 5 cards in hand, but we will come into that at the end of the turn. Star Trek Star Realms has 3 phases throughout a turn. The main phase, the discard phase, and the draw phase. The last 2 very complicated, I know, no idea what they do, but the main phase is argumentally the most powerful of the 3 because it is where the majority of your turn is going to take place. The discard and draw phases are more cleanup sections, I would say. So, looking at the main phase, at any time during the main phase, you may perform any of the following actions as many times as you wish. Playing cards from your hand, using primary abilities in play bases, using ally or scrap abilities in play and ship bases, using trade to acquire or purchase trades from trade row, and using combat to attack your opponent or their bases. We'll get into combat a little bit further down the line, but at this time, there is no cost to playing cards. So if you've got 5 ships in your hand, you can play all 5 ships down. There is no drawback. You do not need to hold cards in your hand. And this is how the game is played. This is how we will acquire resources, by essentially establishing our armada. Yeah, so just to reiterate what I said, there is no cost to playing cards from your hand. You simply place them in play face up on the table, and there are 2 main card types within Star Trek Star Realms. The first type of card is a ship. When a ship is played, its a primary ability automatically fires. There's no choice about it. And if a ship has an ally or scrap ability, you may choose to do one or both of these actions at any time during your main phase, provided you fulfill the requirements of doing so. Ships that you play remain in play in front of you face up until the discard phase where you discard them or you scrap them. As we can see on the card in front of us, this is a Dominion faction ship. It costs 3 to purchase from Trade Row, and its primary ability is to give you 4 combat to use throughout the rest of the turn, and you can choose an opponent that you're playing against and force them to discard a card, making their next turn a lot less impactful because of the fact they'll have less cards in hand at the start of the turn. Then we see an ally ability. The ally ability is a Dominion ability, so it can only be used if there is another Dominion in play. The good thing is, it doesn't matter when you play them. So if I play the Gallo class and then play another Gallo class, I can use both ally abilities because they're both allied together. And then we have a scrap ability, which allows us to take this from play, move it to the scrap pile, and draw a card. A very powerful ability. I do love a good draw ability. So the idea is that you get to draw for your deck, and you want to get through your initial deck very quickly, because once you get through the underlying cards, you start to get to your Dominion, Starfleet, Klingon cards, and this is when the game starts to get a lot more impactful because your abilities will become a lot stronger, and you can finally start popping off with allies. At the end of your turn, all these ships, everything you've played that isn't a location, will be moved to your discard pile. But as we know, when we hit the end of our deck, our discard pile will become our deck. Then we move on to locations. Unlike ships, bases and locations are not discarded at the end of the turn. Instead, they remain in play until they're destroyed or scrapped. Also, unlike ships, you may choose when during the main phase to use the primary ability. So on the Nor type station that we see here, it has a primary ability of +2 combat. If we played a ship, we have to immediately use the primary ability. Here I can choose when to gain that +2 once it's in play. Very powerful. It allows me to kind of have that resource and let me know that if I come across anyone who's playing fast and loose with their authority, that a primary ability is going to be very strong. Each base has a defense number, as you'll see in the bottom right hand corner. That number is essentially its health, its defensive prowess, and that amount must be dealt to it in a single turn for it to be destroyed. If it isn't, it will regenerate and it will not be destroyed. So going back to the example on screen, if this is not dealt 4 combat damage throughout the course of this turn, it will regenerate back up to 4, and that is it. We get to continue on with this in play. But if it is destroyed, it goes to our discard pile, which means hopefully we will draw it again, and we can continue to be quite powerful. As you can see, what I've got down here is an outpost. An outpost is very different to other bases. A regular base will have a grey shield, but an outpost will have a red shield. This indicates that you must attack this first. If I have an outpost in play, you cannot attack me. You cannot attack my other locations. You must interact with the outposts first. They are my first line of defense, and you have to go through them to get to me. Once an outpost is destroyed, it goes to the discard pile, same as any other location. So let's look into more about the abilities in this game. Looking at ships, looking at locations, each have abilities, and with the exception of a ship's primary ability, which happens immediately as the ship is played, players may use various abilities within their turn, but you may only use those abilities once per turn. If an ability grants combat a trade, the resources go into the resource pool, which can be used at any point. So if you gain trade, if you gain combat, you gain immediately, and if you gain authority, it immediately gets added to your authority score. You cannot delay it until you need it, and you can go above your authority. The big thing also, if we look at the examples on here, if we look at the Enterprise, the primary ability has 3 effects. If it has just 3 effects, no additional wording, that is an AND ability. So you gain authority, you gain combat, and you draw cards. But if we look at the Birds of Prey, there is an OR in there. So when you play the Birds of Prey, you may gain trade or you may gain combat. Unfortunately, you don't get both, but you do get a choice, which can be very powerful throughout a turn. When you are playing the game, if you see OR, you have to make a choice. But if the card has multiple symbols, multiple effects, in the single primary or ally or scrap abilities, and doesn't say OR, that is an AND ability, and you get to do all the effects within that ability. So let's talk about ally abilities. Ally abilities are indicated by the faction icon. As we can see on here, we have Starfleet, Romulan, Klingon, and Dominion. You will see these abilities on the leftmost part of the text box. On your turn, an ally ability can be triggered as soon as the restrictions have been met. So if you have a Starfleet ally ability, you need to have another Starfleet faction card in play. So as soon as you have 2 or more cards of the same faction in play, you can then have access to all ally abilities. If I play Enterprise, then play another Starfleet card, I can use an ally ability on both of them. Even though that ship's already in play, even though it's already resolved its primary ability, the ally ability is still viable for me to use. And it means that you get rewarded for picking up cards of the same faction. They can only be played once per turn, though. Remember, even if I play another Starfleet, it does not trigger the ally effects a second time. You only get to play them once. Scrapping ships is a very interesting mechanic because it essentially removes a card from your deck from the game. So you have to be very sparing with this. Once you've used a scrap ability, that ship is gone. You do not have access to that ship yet again. You can identify a scrap ability by the symbol that kind of resembles a trash can at the leftmost side of the card. Anytime during the main phase, you can, by immediately removing it from play and placing it in the scrap pile, you get to benefit from the scrap ability. So here we'd gain some trade from the Romulan ship. But again, have to reiterate, once you scrap a card, it's gone. So please weigh up the pros and cons as whether gaining that trade, essentially getting a new location, getting a new ship into your deck, is worth losing this one from it completely. There are, however, some cards with abilities that allow you to scrap from other zones. We have cards such as the Birds of Prey, which allows you to discard from your hand or discard pile, which means that you can take ships that you may not want to see on your next cycle of your deck and replace them with abilities such as authority or trade, or gaining these other abilities to draw more cards or just benefit your deck in other ways. This is a good way of managing your deck, but again, choosing what to get rid of. I think Birds of Prey is a great example here because we can scrap our non-aligned neutral ships and make sure that we can keep picking up the ships of our factions, the ships that are pushing that what we want to do, and allowing us to get our ally abilities a lot stronger. Scrapping is a very strategic part of the game, and mastering scrap is part of mastering the game. Some cards' abilities give you trade, as we've mentioned before. When gaining trade, it goes into your trade pool, which you may add and use over the course of your main phase. Trade is used to purchase ships from trade row, and there will always be 5 cards within trade row. A card's cost can be found in the top right hand corner of the card, and then you basically subtract the amount of the card from your trade pool and you place that card into your discard pile. You don't draw it, you don't get to play either way. We are building a deck. We are building our armada by taking ships and putting them into a discard pile. And once we cycle that first time, we have our more powerful deck. The first few turns will be set up, acquiring cards of power to build up our decks, monitoring what our opponents are doing so that we know what to expect from them in the future. Purchasing a card does not count as playing it. You don't get any primary abilities, you don't get any other abilities. It just goes to your discard and you have to wait until you draw, unfortunately. Some card abilities do instruct you to acquire a card, as we can see on screen. And acquiring a card allows you to take a card from the relative zone without paying a cost. So if you can acquire a card from trade row, you take that card from trade row without paying the cost, which means your trade stays the same. And this means that you can establish a much more powerful deck and get a hold of some very powerful cards without using any resources. And again, at the end of this, I'm just going to quickly reiterate, if there is less than 5 cards within trade row, you must replace it. It goes from the trade deck face up so people know what they're purchasing. Trade row must always have 5 cards in them so that more players can acquire cards and the game can keep flowing. You don't have to wait until it's empty to refill. Once there's a space, you refill that space. Now let's move on to an exciting part of the game. Let's move on to combat.
I say we eject the warp core!
So, attacking. Some abilities give you combat. When you gain combat, it goes into your combat pool, which you may add and use over the course of your main phase. You may use combat to attack your opponent or their bases, and you may make any number of attacks over the course of a main phase. If you want to attack each opponent and each of their locations for 1 damage, it doesn't make any difference, but you can do that. It's well within your rights as a player. To make an attack against a base, you subtract the combat from your card pool and equal to defensive base. That defensive base is destroyed and moves to your opponent's discard pile. Sometimes a card ability just instructs you to destroy a target base. In that case, you destroy the base without using any combat. Similar to acquiring a card, if a card says destroy a base, you destroy that base. That location is gone. To attack your opponents, you subtract the amount from your combat pool that you want to deal, and then your opponent will lower their authority by that amount. Once again, to reiterate what I've said earlier on, if they have the red shielding on any of their locations, any of their bases, that is what you attack first. You cannot target a player or any of their non-outpost bases until the outposts are down. It's a great defensive line, and making sure you have enough combat to get through those outposts is very important because, like I said, if that outpost does not hit 0 defense, it will regenerate and you'll have to deal with it the next turn. Attacking is a very powerful part of the game. Making sure that you don't make too many enemies among people in a multiplayer game is very important. And making sure you get your rival down low, very good. And making sure you use your combat, because as we're about to talk about in the next phase, using your resources is very important throughout a turn. After the main phase, we move on to the discard phase. Whenever you discard a card or acquire a new card from trade row, you place that card in your discard pile face up. A player may look through your discard pile at any time. is a public zone of information. During your discard phase, you will lose any remaining trade, any remaining combat, all ships that have been played will go into your discard pile, and any card left in your hand will go to your discard pile. You wipe the slate clean apart from locations. Your bases and outposts stay, but you lose the cards in your hand, any remaining combat, and any remaining trade. Your authority you gained, you keep. That's fine. But unfortunately, everything else goes. And then after that, you get to just replace your hand as we move on to the draw phase, where you draw 5 cards and your turn ends. Big red notice there. If you need to draw a card from your personal deck and it is empty, you shuffle your discard and you put it face down. That's at the end of the turn through abilities. If you need to draw a card and you have none left, so if you need to draw up to 5 and you only have 3 in your deck, you shuffle and you get to draw the additional 2. There's no penalties that way. But your turn ends with you replacing your hand, which is where abilities like the discard effects come in, because you're losing your ships and you're losing your cards for your next turn if your opponent makes you discard cards. I am very excited to play this game. I think it's very, very cool. It has a lot of expansion potential. I think Star Trek is a great way for it to come through, and I really want to make content on this, so please interact with this video. Let me know what you're feeling, and check out this accessories that we're already seeing from UVS. Look at these playmats with trade row quite clearly put there. These are 2-player playmats from what I can see, because trade row goes in the middle, and they're absolutely gorgeous. The space one, I've already contacted Card Goblin and basically said, yeah, put me down, I want one of these. But let me know what you think. Have you already played Star Realms before? What do you think about the current update to the core set? Where can we go next? What other factions do you want to see brought into the game? Do you want this game to have its own organized play, tournaments, worlds? I have read for the rules. I've not got a chance to play a game yet, but apparently there's a mobile app for the regular Star Realms, so I might give that a shout. Are you going to pick this up? Would you like to play a game? I'm more than happy to sit and play a game with people. I am really excited to give this game a go. It looks very intuitive, looks very strategic, and I am very excited to actually play this game and see where UVS takes it. The fact that we can have this reskinning of a core mechanic, the fact we can expand it, the fact that we can look further into the Star Trek IP, I mean, this is absolutely amazing. And if you are interested and just want to take a look at the abilities first, the full card core set is available on the UVS Games website on Star Realms/core. It's in the rulebooks, it's on here, and you can look at every single card in every single faction and take a look at what these cards do. You can see all the classes, you can see all the locations. I think these are very, very cool cards. I like the fact that, similar to Universe's style, we're getting screenshots and action grabs from throughout the shows, and we're seeing them at different angles, we're seeing different versions. I think this is very, very cool. I really want to play this game. I'm not the biggest Trek head, but I'm really excited to get a hold of this game. I didn't know Dominion was an entire thing, but seeing these ships, it makes me want to go back and rewatch. If I didn't have like 200 episodes of Critical Role to catch up on, I might have picked up Star Trek again. Really do love the Dominion, because we've got the Klingons as well. If you are interested in a ship tier list, I would happily sit here and make a ship and location tier list. And then we have our unaligned starters with our 8 scout ships we get in our starting deck, our 2 raiders, and then we have the Decor class Ferengi ship, which is what will be in trade row. Very, very cool. I'm very excited to get started on this game. If you've got any questions, if you want to play, if you just want to talk about Star Trek Realms, let me know. This is a game I, again, didn't know existed until UVS put out that, and I wanted to do a quick how to play. And if I can find some people to play with either through webcam or TTS or other services if they exist, I will get some gameplay going on as well. Thanks for watching. I would love to do more about this in the future. It's out now. Check out your local game store. Bye.